will be appendicular. So go ahead and get started with the skeletal system now. Your bones have multiple functions. The most obvious functions are those that are visible through observation. Just by looking at someone, we can see how bones could support, facilitate movement, and protect the body. You can think of bones as supportive scaffolding for your body, so without them you'd be a limp mass of organs, skin, and muscle. Your bones also facilitate movement by serving as attachment sites for your muscles. Bones also protect internal organs from injury by covering or surrounding them, such as your ribs protecting your lungs and heart, or your bones of your cranium protecting your brain. On a metabolic level, bones act as reservoirs for calcium and phosphorus, storing them for a rainy day when the body needs them. Your bones also serve as sites for fat storage and blood cell production. So the softer tissue on the inside of bones is bone marrow. And there are two types. We have yellow marrow and red marrow. Yellow marrow has adipose tissue in it, and red marrow is going to be the site of hematopoiesis, so like the production of red and white blood cells as well as platelets. So as you can see, bones have functions that contribute to a function, or bones have functions. So as you can see, bones have many functions that contribute to a functioning organism. So bone matrix is the non-living part of the bone. It is the white that we see when we think of bone. You can't see cells without a microscope. It consists of 35% organic material, such as collagen and proteoglycans, and then 65% of inorganic hydroxyapatite. And this is another name for mineral salts that make up the bone, and it's very hard. And so the primary mineral salt in this matrix is calcium phosphate, and without it, the bones would be too flexible. We see this in the disease rickets, where a child's legs bow outward due to the lack of calcium. The collagen and proteoglycans in bone help it become more flexible and withstand more force without breaking, as well as make sure that there's water in the bone tissue. The key point in this slide is to understand that the bone is made of matrix and bone cells. You should be able to identify the different components of bone matrix and its function, as well as talk about the different types of cells, which we'll get to shortly. And then we'll also talk about the two different types of bone, primary and secondary bone, as well as how compact bone and spongy bone differ. So we have different anatomical parts of bones, and here we have a long bone. And so what we see in the middle area is the diaphysis, and inside of that diaphysis we have the medullary cavity. And this is where yellow bone marrow resides in adults, red bone marrow for children. On the ends of bones, we have the epiphysis, and this will consist of red marrow in both young and adults, young children and adults, and this will fill in the space where the cancellous bone is, or the spongy bone is. We'll get to that in a little bit here. The endosteum, which you can kind of see, is basically the inside of the diaphysis. This is where growth and repair and remodeling will occur, and it's a delicate membranous lining that endosteum is. The outer surface of the bone is covered with a fibrous membrane called periosteum, and this periosteum contains the blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels that nourish compact bone. And so you can think of the endosteum, end being in, and oste meaning bone, inside bone, and peri being around or surrounding, and osteum being bone, so it's surrounding bone. Periosteum is surrounding the bone, and the endosteum is inside. All right, so that's general anatomy of the bone. And so we have multiple different types of cells. We have osteocytes, which are osteoblasts that have been trapped within lacunae. We'll get to that in a little bit. These are more mineralized, basically, and you can think of this lacunae as a cavity, so both having a hard C sound, lacunae and a cavity. The osteoblasts are what actually form the bone matrix, okay? So they're the bone builders. They have many endoplasmic reticulum and ribosomes to help make the many proteins that are found in the bone matrix. And then we have the osteogenic cells. These are stem cells that can differentiate into osteoblasts and osteoclasts. And then osteoclasts are what resorb bones. These are the bone breakers they break down the matrix by breaking down the calcium and the collagen in the bone matrix. And this osteoclast activity is not necessarily bad. It actually happens during normal bone remodeling and repair. So again, osteoblasts make bone matrix, osteoclasts resorb or remove bone matrix. And this is a necessary component of having bones, having both these active. And so here's a little table that puts together the different functions of those cells as well as their locations. And so we find osteogenic cells deep in the layers of the periosteum and marrow, and these help develop into osteoblasts. And then we have the osteoblasts that grow portions of the bone, including the periosteum and endosteum. And then we also see osteocytes that are entrapped in the matrix, and they help maintain the minimal concentration of that matrix. Osteoclasts, again, resorb that bone, and they're found on the bone surfaces and at sites of old, injured, or unneeded bone that needs to be removed. And so I'll have a diagram of this compact bone that we'll label together in class, but you can think of compact bone as the solid bone with no open spaces, as we'll see when we get to spongy bone. Compact bone can be found under the periosteum and inside the diaphysis of long bones, where it provides support and structure. So you can see a long bone here, you can find it inside or under the periosteum, which is that outer fibrous connective or tissue, and then the inside the diaphysis here. The microscopic structural unit of the compact bone is called an osteon. Each osteon is composed of concentric rings of calcified matrix called lamellae. Those are the circles, kind of look like tree trunks. Running down the center of each osteon is the central canal, which contains blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels. And these branch off at right angles through a perforating canal, also known as a Volkmann's canal, and extend to the periosteum and endosteum, so the around part of the bone and the inside part of the bone. And this ensures that blood from the general circulation penetrates deep into the bone, making sure that all of this tissue is very much so alive. So notice the tree trunk structures that are characteristic of long bone. Each set of rings within the central canal, or with the central canal in the middle, is what we call an osteon. So this entire structure is an osteon. Each osteon has a central canal, and the darker dots that line the lamellae are the osteocytes. The osteocytes are trapped within the lacunae, the cavity, and there are canaliculi that extend from the osteocytes that connect osteocytes to each other and eventually lead into the central canal to form a system of connectivity so that all of the bone tissue is getting the nutrients that it needs and the wastes that it doesn't need removed.